Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We will, not quite by the time I come off air, but almost, have a new Prime Minister. There are no prizes for predicting who it is going to be. That became crystal clear yesterday. And his cabinet appointments and sundry other posts being filled, we will bring to you as and when it happens. But Boris Alexander de Pfeffel Johnson is probably the politician that we've spoken about more during our time together over the last few years than any other. Not least because when I started life on the radio, LBC was confined to London, and Boris Johnson, his entire mayoralty, coincided with our conversations. And I moved, and many of you moved, although plenty of people moved in the opposite direction, from thinking he was a rather good egg, to employ the sort of language he ordinarily utilises, a rather good egg, to thinking he was deeply and profoundly dodgy. Possibly even dangerous. A podcast interview I did with Rory Stewart that has gone mildly bonkers this week, in which he pauses for 11 seconds before answering the question of just how dangerous you think he is. In many ways today, I kind of envy people who will be feeling upbeat and happy about this idea. I always envy people feeling upbeat and happy. Optimism is infinitely preferable to pessimism, even for those of us who are generally pretty chippy, chirpy and cheerful about life. But I'm not seeing much positivity. This is the weird thing. What I'm mostly seeing, what passes for reasons to celebrate, and this may be the sort of legacy of the so-called culture wars. I don't know. Bear with. This idea that it's not about actually enjoying a positive, it's about enjoying other people's negatives. Someone put it brilliantly on Twitter this morning. It's about collecting the tears of your enemies. And that's why I find Boris Johnson so fascinating. Because Boris Johnson became Mayor of London by wooing, what I think somewhat lazily, but for the simplicity of expression, we will call the metropolitan liberals. You know, Londoners, people who are tolerant, people who enjoy living in big, multinational, multicultural environments, people who are very 21st century. And he won us over. And now he's become Prime Minister by, I think, and again, as ever, as soon as I say something you want to find fault with, then 0345 6060973 is the number. I think that he has become Prime Minister by appealing to the precise opposite. That's the first point of discussion. Do you think that's true? Boris Johnson became Mayor of London by wooing metropolitan liberals. He's become Prime Minister of the United Kingdom by wooing people who profess to despise metropolitan liberals. Just a straight discuss. 0345 6060973. And that's very weird. Politically and historically, it's his power. It's a superpower in political terms. It's as if he has pivoted from one position to the other, while those positions should cancel each other out, and he's somehow managed to harvest votes from both sides. I kind of at times like this, I commit myself to trying to find things upon which we can all agree. Do you agree with that? He became Mayor of London by wooing metropolitan liberals. He's become Prime Minister by wooing people who profess to despise metropolitan liberals. I think that's pretty copper-bottomed, actually. Let's see what you think. 0345 6060973. Loads of calls today. I never really I enjoyed yesterday's show, don't get me wrong. I mean, it was historic and amazing, and we spoke to a cavalcade of fascinating, qualified people. But I generally prefer talking to you. So today, hopefully, it will be uninterrupted calls and lots of me. 0345 6060973 is the number you need. Just pick over that as well. I mean, how's he pulled that off, do you think? Becomes Mayor of London by wooing metropolitan liberals, becomes Prime Minister by throwing them under a bus. Designed by Thomas Heatherwick. 0345 6060973. And that, I think, leads to a question that I wonder whether this question has had the stuffing knocked out of it by events. What does Boris Johnson stand for? 0345 6060973. I don't want to make any suggestions there, because I can't see any. I don't know what he stands for. Is that a strength or a weakness? I mean, we're living in such bizarre times. It seems that being able to move from wooing London by bending the knee to metropolitan liberalism, to be able to move from that to wooing the Conservative Party membership that, is, according to most polling, rooted firmly in the early years of the 1950s. He's managed to woo both constituencies according to the job in front of him. I don't think you need to be myopic or wearing rose-tinted, bottle-bottomed spectacles to possibly portray that as a strength. No? To be all things to all men? Up to the point where those men start arguing. And this is where I think, actually, in a way that I hadn't really clocked before, he is Brexit, isn't he? Because Brexit succeeds, or succeeded, precisely because Dominic Cummings, who's just been given a job, I'm told, in Downing Street, the sort of brains behind the law-breaking Vote Leave campaign, he was absolutely clear that you had to keep the detail away from the table, because the minute the detail emerged, then you'd realise that people who were ostensibly on the same team in leave or remain terms were actually passionately opposed to each other in terms of detail. So I think history will probably record that as the masterstroke of the entire campaign, was to think that you could vote for that sort of Brexit and that sort of Brexit, and you could both somehow win. And that's why, inevitably, it has been reduced subsequently to claiming that everybody voted to leave. They didn't. Everybody voted to leave in a certain way. But we're now, of course, being compelled to pretend that we don't care how we leave, whether it's good or whether it's bad. We just want to leave. So Boris Johnson, I think, has done something similar. Yes, it's just been confirmed that Dominic Cummings, as I mentioned a moment ago, is to become a senior advisor to Boris Johnson. And that adds to my very nascent theory that Boris is Brexit made flesh. Because now all of the people who think that he is their man are going to discover, I think, that he can't be, aren't they? He will end up being somebody's man. And early indications are not pretty. If like me, you believe that British people are not among the laziest in the world, if like me, you believe that healthcare according to clinical need rather than wealth is a shining totem before which we should all bow. If like me, you believe that if tax cuts are going to be made, it should probably be directed not at people like me, but at people who are not earning well in excess of the national average. These simple observations, looking at some of the early noises, some of the early suggestions about who he's going to put into positions of power. For example, Priti Patel, heading for the Home Office, we're told. Priti Patel fired by Theresa May, or forced to resign by Theresa May. And I'll say these words slowly, because at any other period in British political history, I think this would be career-ending. It wouldn't involve a period on the sidelines before securing a massive promotion. In the company of a lobbyist, she opened secret back channels to a foreign regime and then lied about it to the British Prime Minister. Dominic Cummings, within weeks of arriving in government as an advisor to Michael Gove, revealed that he wouldn't be responding to any emails that came in on official accounts. He would only respond to emails from people he knew on his Gmail, because otherwise there'd be a trail you'd be able to check. So again, unaccountability and lack of transparency and unelected bureaucrats, we've really stuck it to them, haven't we, by voting for Brexit. So I mean, as ever, I desperately hope Boris Johnson swings back towards what he pretended to be to become Mayor of London, as opposed to what he's pretended to be to become Prime Minister. It's possible, I suppose, that there is a real Boris Johnson who stands for something, but it's impossible at this point in proceedings to determine precisely what it is. So this line I do like, but I worry I'm getting a bit bogged down in this. I'm haunted by the ghost of Steve, the caller who rang us a few weeks ago and said, I don't care if Donald Trump lies to me. I just love the fact that he upsets people like you and Sadiq Khan. I still haven't got my head properly around that, but an awful lot of response to Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister today is, salty tears of who exactly? I mean, most metropolitan liberal elites are set to get a tax cut off the fella. So why are they dismayed by him becoming Prime Minister? It's almost as if they care more about other people than they do about themselves, which is, of course, the polar opposite of what the Conservative Party seems to be moving towards. So give me that then. What does he stand for? What do you think he stands for? As a fan or a foe, I would rather talk to fans. What do you think Boris Johnson actually stands for? And if, like me, you're wondering whether we need to slightly recalibrate our entire political coverage, does it matter anymore? I always remember American politics being described to me as a beauty contest. I did an A-level in comparative American politics, and the big difference, you don't dig particularly deeply at A-level into the finer detail, but the big difference was usually these elections were fought on personality, you know, that they weren't fought on policy. Things like the death penalty and abortion would count as major policy movements, but the period of consensus, post-war consensus politics that in this country lasted until 1979 and in America lasted a little longer, it was actually more about charisma. And Johnson is quite presidential in the sense that he surrounds himself supposedly with really good people and himself becomes a sort of figurehead. In which case, genuine question, does it matter that he doesn't seem to stand for anything? And if you're spitting nails at the suggestion that the man you wanted to be Prime Minister doesn't actually have any principles, ideals or ideologies, then do ring me now and tell me what you think they are. 0345 60 60 973. All of which is a very roundabout and convoluted way of saying nobody really seems to be celebrating for positive reasons. Everybody seems to be celebrating because of the people they think will be upset or deflated or diminished by this news. But the people who will be upset by this news are the people who care about the NHS, who care about our standing on the world stage, who care about how much protection the NHS or the welfare state receives, how much funding our police and our hospitals receive, the idea that tax cuts for the rich are unlikely to engender increases in public spending. What exactly are you cheering, is my question today. What exactly are you cheering? Because if it's contagious, then I'd quite like a bit of it. 0345 60 60 973. Reasons to be cheerful. I'm not going to pretend that I am overcome with optimism about the prospect of a Boris Johnson premiership, but if you are, and I mean actual positives, as opposed to, it's really upset Owen Jones or something like that. Actual positives, things to celebrate rather than just a degree of schadenfreude in the discomfort of people who worry that Boris Johnson is going to hurt you. that's just hilarious, actually. And there's someone over there who cares about me. They're really cross today because Boris Johnson's Prime Minister. That doesn't help. What does help? The positives. 0345 60 60 973 is the number you need. Sarah is in Hereford. Sarah, what have we got? Let's start our list of positives.
Well, I am trying to be very positive,
Good.
even though there's no way in hell I would ever vote for the bloke. But
why not?
Well, I'm not a Tory supporter anyway.
Well, nor is London historically, and yet he got London. He won London.
Yeah, I don't think most of the Labour supporters in London would be voting for Corbyn at the moment anyway, but it's not about Corbyn.
No, anyway,
but
carry on.
It's about what, at the moment, he's optimist, he's positive about it, whereas Theresa May was quite dull, and she's repetitive.
Yes.
I mean, like I said, I'm trying to look at the positives. He wants to get this done. I mean, he's only got a short time to get this done. If he messes this up, then I think the Tory party might be finished. So it's really, really on him now to get this done. And I'm kind of behind him, and I really want him to sort Brexit because it's just getting so much now. The anger in people about Brexit is unbelievable from both sides.
The problem is, and I think this is going to work as a theory, he is Brexit. So the reason why Brexit has gone so wrong, and the reason why it was so easy to predict that it would go so wrong, is that there was no Brexit. And you could pick two Brexit voters at random, sit them down in this studio now, ask them to describe what they voted for, and it would become clear before the end of the second contribution that there's no earthly way. There is no Brexit that would make them both happy.
No.
There's no Boris Johnson that can make two supporters happy. There's the people that think he's a forward-looking pro-immigration metropolitan liberal, and here's a long list of quotes to prove it. And then there's the people who think that he's a sort of sub-Donald Trump, quasi-racist, rabble-rousing, sort of nationalist, and here's a long list of quotes to support their point of view as well. I don't have the words to describe that. That is like trying to argue that black is white and black is black at the same time. But don't take this the wrong way. I'm kind of awed by it.
I get that.
Do you?
I get that completely.
It doesn't work on me, but the people it does work on, I mean, it's almost like he's an alchemist. It's almost like he's a magician.
It's like he's a celebrity.
Do you think it's that simple?
I think, yeah, I do. I think because everyone knows him. Everyone knows him. Even people that aren't into politics, they know who Boris Johnson is. They saw him.
Well, they know who Dr. Crippen is. It doesn't necessarily speak of a facility for.
I honestly don't think he'd be voted. If he went to a general election, I don't think he'd win it. I think it'd be a hung parliament. Yeah.
Oh well, I'm not going to argue with that. But in terms of positives, he's optimistic. Well, he's not really. I mean, he's seeming quite optimistic at the moment. But I don't know what does optimism butter any parsnips. 10:23 is the time. What is it you like most about him? Ideally not in personality terms, and I think optimism gets filed under personality. In terms of policies or political achievements, okay? 0345 606 0973. I'm working on the principle, the presumption, that we're not going to get a very long list. I would love you to tell me why you think that doesn't matter. Because there comes a point where you begin to wonder whether you're wasting your time caring about things like integrity and morality, honesty, decency. Hey, you look across at America and you realise, actually, you can get elected to the highest office in the world with multiple rape accusations hanging over you, with a personal morality that is... It probably would see you expelled from most alley cat fraternities, would expel you in disgust if you had a personal life like Donald Trump's. Politically, you're just lying through your teeth every single day, but it doesn't matter. Are we really stooping that low? 0345 606 0973. And if I mean, you can't argue with anything I've just said. He does have multiple rape accusations hanging over his head. He does lie through his teeth every single day. And he does... make a mockery of any pretense towards integrity or probity. I don't think you'll ring me up and tell me why that doesn't matter anymore. But if you were minded to, I'd just love to get inside that moral or intellectual calculation that concludes, yeah, okay, he's all those things, but I don't mind because... ... Alan's in Colchester. Alan, the list currently has the word optimism on it.
Yeah, well, I didn't have it.
Well, I'm not very optimistic about the quality of your phone line. It sounds like you've fallen down a well since you were put on hold. 24 minutes after 10 is the time. Appointments coming through, and we will bring you up to speed with them as and when they are confirmed. I don't think you'll get the big political appointments, will you, until after he is actually Prime Minister. But it has been confirmed that he'll be moving Dominic Cummings into Downing Street as an advisor. I'll just read you some interesting words from Dominic Cummings, if you are... in the sort of Jacob Rees-Mogg fan club. Those of you in the narcissist delusional subset of the ERG who have spent the last 3 years scrambling for the 8:10 Today slot while spouting gibberish about trade and the law across SW1, i.e. exactly the contemptible behaviour that led to your enforced marginalisation during the referendum and your attempt to destroy Vote Leave, you are also in the pirate category. This is Boris Johnson's first appointment as a senior advisor. You were useful idiots for Remain during the campaign, and with every piece of BS from Bill Cash et al., you have helped only Remain for 3 years. Remember how you welcomed, in great big capital letters, the backstop as a triumph in December 2017, when it was obvious to everybody who knew what was going on, not the cabinet obviously, that this effectively ended the negotiations. And I mean, that's kind of what I mean. Here he is, laying into the ERG in no uncertain terms, Boris Johnson's first backroom appointment, having seen Boris Johnson achieve Downing Street by attaching the ERG to his coattails. I'm not going to lie to you, I haven't got a clue what's going on at the moment. I don't think you have either, but if we all throw something into the pot, we might end up with at least the beginnings of an answer. Dorothy's in Stockwell. Dorothy, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say that I think maybe the word you're looking for is chameleon.
Chameleon?
That whoever you talk to, you agree with. And it's quite a quality.
Yes.
I think, in retrospect, it's always very easy, but I think 3 years ago when we actually voted, there was so much undeveloped stuff in the north of England, in the Midwest of England. The industry was gone. There were no jobs. And it had to be somebody's fault. So why not the EU?
Yes.
And then now, when you actually see the complexity, when people actually try to unravel, then normally there'd be remorse and regret, but instead you get a snake oil salesman who says it's very, very simple. There's no problem. It's as other people who are saying it's a problem.
Don't all... I mean, this is... The interview I did with Rory Stewart is fascinating because he is baffled by what you've just described. He describes the BBC leadership interview as his Thermopylae, really. I mean,
I don't think it's baffling. I think it's hair of the dog.
Well, no, he's baffled by it because he sat there and said, well, of course we can't have tax cuts. And then he explained why and what he thought were completely inarguable terms. He said, we need to increase public spending. We can't increase public spending if we decrease the amount in the public purse. And he made this point on stage. And then the other contenders queued up to say, no, we'll be able to do this and we'll be able to do that. So Johnson's not unique or even special in the sense that he makes unkeepable promises.
But he's the most successful.
He's just very good at it, isn't he?
He's extremely good. And at the moment, it's like we've got a snake oil salesman who's telling them, whoever voted for it, that they weren't wrong.
Do you know, I use that phrase all the time myself. And obviously by the end, I was very unreserved in my criticism of Theresa May, but I still feel some sort of, even with a politician that I have derided for decades, I still think he's Prime Minister now. Give him a chance. And calling him a snake oil salesman on day one, is it helpful? I mean, it might be accurate, but if he is a chameleon, couldn't he change into something good and positive and excellent?
Well, if there was a single majority, then yes, of course he could. If there's no majority, I think you have to keep agreeing with the last person you talked to.
And he has a majority of one, potentially, with criminal charges being brought and by-elections on horizons. 10:29 is the time. I guess the question is going to have to be, does it matter? Well, I think it does. I think I'll always think it does. I think I'll always look askance at politicians who lie in the way that Boris Johnson has lied. Not politicians who say something before something happens and then they turn out to have got it wrong, like a misprediction or a misspeak. But to lie, he got sacked from the Times for making up quotes from his own godfather. You don't do that by accident, you know? I think it matters if you cheat on your wife a lot, and I thought Conservatives did. I thought it mattered to your public probity how much evidence there was of private immorality. But I don't know. It seems to me increasingly that the kind of people who stand up and start talking about Judeo-Christian values are going for a clean sweep on breaking the Ten Commandments. It's 10:30. Mark in Bromley makes a good point. He says, morning, James. He's the only MP that me and my mates would most want to take down the pub and have a few beers with. And he would be good company. He'd be funny, you know, chatting up the barmaid, possibly disappearing around the back of the barrels for 20 minutes or so. He wouldn't buy a round, I'm told, but I completely understand that. I used to feel the same. I don't know if we should be putting people in charge of the country on the grounds that we'd quite like to have a pint with them. I can't imagine anything worse than having a pint with Gordon Brown. He'd be talking about fiscal policy, probably. But in terms of whose hands would feel safer on your tiller, I don't think there's any contest at all, is there? 10:34 is the time. I should have used a different example than Gordon Brown, because automatically it all gets footballified. John Major, all right? Wouldn't particularly want to go for a pint with John Major. Am I being unfair to John Major? Certainly wouldn't want to go for a pint with Margaret Thatcher. Would quite like to go for a pint with Boris Johnson before the mask slipped. So yeah, I get that. But is that really what we want in a Prime Minister? I think that's the world we're living in. Tony's in Canterbury. Tony, what would you put on the positives list? Things to look forward to. Reasons to be cheerful is the phrase I'm looking for. No, Edmund is in Luton. Edmund, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
I think there might be something wrong with my phones.
Are you there?
I'm here. Yes, I don't really like talking to people who are driving, but needs must. Let's hang on. You just bear with. Tony's in Canterbury. Tony, something has gone wrong with our phone lines. Just see if we can get this one up. Tony's in Canterbury. Tony, reasons to be cheerful.
Morning, James. Maybe the phone went wrong because I'm a massive optimist who had a bit of bubbly last night.
Carry on.
No, I just think the difference between being a social liberal and equating that with somebody who wants to do Brexit is wrong. I mean, you just have to look at the European Union at the moment. It's not exactly stuffed with social liberals. So the fact that Boris can be a London liberal and still want Brexit, I don't see there's any problem with that at all.
Nor
he's
do
a man
I.
of all people.
Nor do I. I'm not. The depiction of people who profess to despise metropolitan liberals wasn't necessarily linked to Brexit. It was more the fact that, you know, he's got people like Donald Trump praising him, and people who like Donald Trump also like Boris Johnson. I'm happy, God knows I'm happy, to leave Brexit out of the equation entirely. He has clearly got on side people who think that he's on the same side as they are on issues like nationalism, Islamophobia, and even race, actually. I think he's faking it when he appeals to that lobby, but he's appealed to them successfully. To become Mayor of London, he had to, well, appeal to the polar opposite constituency, people who are comfortable with diversity, people who recognise modernity and know that massive cities will be multicultural and multicoloured. He's become Prime Minister by wooing people who aren't comfortable with that view of the 21st century. It's nothing to do with Brexit.
No, but that's the problem at the moment. Is that, again, you were saying about 17.4 million people diverse. Yeah, the Remainers having diverse views. They're not united, and so you could have the social.
But again, you're answering questions. You're answering questions I'm not asking. So, I mean, 16 odd million people voted to remain in the European Union. 17.4 million people voted to leave, and here is the man who ran Vote Leave describing the ERG spouting gibberish about trade, contemptible behaviour that led to your enforced marginalisation during the referendum, useful idiots, every piece of BS from Bill Cash you helped to remain. This is. There you go. You should be treated like a I don't know. This is one of those words I struggle with. Metastasizing. You should be treated like a metastasizing tumour and excised from the UK body politic, says the head of Vote Leave, the brains behind Vote Leave, to the ERG. So, I mean, look, I'm not going to fall out with you, but you can't ring in and say, well, the Remain party's got just as many disagreements as problems. The bloke who ran Vote Leave has got a job in Downing Street, and he described the ERG as needing to be treated like a metastasizing tumour and excised from the UK body politic, mate. Boris Johnson has somehow kept both sides happy. My question is, how on earth is he going to keep them both happy when one looks at the other and sees a tumour?
Because politics is a massive mosaic of trying to tick all the right boxes at the right time.
No, you misunderstood me, mate. I said, how is he going to keep them both happy? And you've answered by keeping them both happy. It's the how I want, not the what. Try again.
You don't have to keep the ERG 100%. You don't have to keep Dominic Grieve 100%. All you need to do is
well, tell that to Theresa May. Edmund is in Luton. Edmund, what would you like to say?
How you doing, James? Good morning. Look, I can't. I mean, I wouldn't agree with people saying that, you know, the thing I like about Boris is this: if anyone can gather a crowd behind him to win votes, and he does. He knows how to do that. He knows how to get people behind him. You can call him a clown. You can call him whatever you want to call him. Now, I'm not a fan of Boris. Definitely not. I don't think he'll be.
But you buy into this winnability notion, this charisma notion, and that does seem to trump all of the things that used to be conservative values, whether you want to talk about marriage.
Well, you see, James.
Go on.
Well, you see, James, this is the precedent this is setting. And this is the same thing with Donald Trump. Let me tell you what this is doing.
Go on.
Now, with all of that, because this is the future, so people can get voted in for charisma and how funny they are, or how outlandish and shooting off the hip they can do. This is what's setting. Now, we're supposed to set a certain kind of rule and precedent in the world. Now, what will happen, and what you start seeing happen in the future, is people that we're supposed to tame from being like this and being like Trump, we won't be able to do that anymore, because how can you tell someone, another leader in another country, that's probably spouting racist views and to people he doesn't like, that, well, you can't do that because it's not conservative to the world. Well, the world leaders are doing it, you know. So
yeah, but Trump and Johnson, I really, really, really hope I'm right about this. I don't think Johnson deserves to be lumped in with Trump on some of this stuff. I know that Trump has tried to lump Johnson in with himself, but the bottom line is that if things start going badly for Boris Johnson, I don't think he's going to start blaming it on politicians of colour or migrants. I just don't.
James, this guy is not yet a prime minister.
No.
So we don't know yet. Well, he's not
No, but he
yet
was
the prime
mayor of London
minister.
for 8 years, and he never did the kind of scapegoating that
Well,
Donald
it's not
Trump
the
would
same,
do.
though. It's not the same when you're dealing with other world leaders as well. And let's be honest, he's the same person that did say, I'm not saying he is, but it's the same person that called the burqa women a post box or whatever you call it.
Well, this is
So-
what I mean by moving from wooing metropolitan liberals. Actually, plenty of metropolitan liberals have a problem with the full face veil, but that's a conversation for a different day. Saying things to make them think he was on their side, and then very deliberately saying things that could have come straight out of Steve Bannon's back pocket, i.e. insulting Muslim women, which makes a significant swathe of the electorate think that he's somehow on their side in this non-existent culture war.
Well, he's really not on their side. He was just doing it for the votes. Because,
How do you know
look,
that? How do you know that? Is he on our side? Is he on your side? Is he on their side? Or is he on the other side? Whose side is he on?
I don't know what side he's on, and this is where we're about to find out. But guess what we're doing? We're risking 4 years of our lives and the economy to figure that out. So, well, that's what it is. And that's
Yeah,
where
well,
we're
and we'll have to watch this space. Just to clarify, the last fellow, why he was so wrong when he talked about not having to keep everybody happy. He has a majority potentially of 1. That includes 10 DUP members. He literally has to keep 100% of his MPs happy. In fact, it's impossible to conceive of circumstances where it could be less accurate to say he doesn't have to keep all of his MPs happy. He literally has to keep them all happy. That's why I can't see what's round the next corner. And that, of course, is a question at 10:42 that we'll add into the mix. What is round the next corner? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. What does he stand for? Okay? 0345. Well, I've just told you the number, and the phone lines are full anyway, but I'm worried about that switchboard glitch a moment ago. Terry's in High Wycombe. Terry, what does he stand for? Or does it matter that he doesn't seem to stand for anything?
I just think that he stands for something that you are not. We're just so tired of people like you consistently having one outlook on anybody in the Tory party that you can't give a balanced view.
Well, I can.
The thing about it is, I am a
spoke
Tory
to several
member,
Conservatives
and I voted
yesterday.
for Boris.
Yes. So why? Let's not talk
voted
about
for
me,
Boris.
Terry. Let's talk about you. What do you like? What does he stand for?
He stands for politicians who think about the Leave voters.
The
who
Leave
really
voters.
think about the Leave voters and the whole lot of things that Leave voters voted for. As far as you're concerned, it's only the Remain and the EU voice that should be heard. Anything else? And I'm black, so I'm not racist.
No, no one's mentioned racist or actually Brexit or the EU except the last fellow. I mean, I think we can park that for the purposes of this conversation. He's obviously in favour of leaving. It's going to be difficult for him to keep happy the ERG and the man he's just appointed as an advisor who wrote the ERG should be treated like a tumour and excised from the UK body politic. It's going to be difficult for him to keep both of those constituencies happy.
No,
it's not.
I think that's what he's going in for. And that's what Leave voters want. But
this is what Dominic Cummings wrote, and this is his first appointment to Downing Street.
But whatever Dominic Cummings wrote, and he hasn't seen it, is not what Boris is saying. Look how many times.
But if I was going to give you a job, I'd look at your CV, Terry.
And but the thing
and if I looked at Dominic Cummings,
when I was 20. It's completely different from who I am at 50.
He wrote this on March the 27th.
What did he... tell me that again, sorry.
Dominic Cummings wrote, you should be treated, talking about the ERG, you should be treated like a metastasizing tumour and excised from the UK body politic. You guys were too busy shooting...
Boris is just trying to bring people together.
Yes.
So that is one of the things he probably
So he's bringing together the tumour and the man who despises the tumour. But anyway, we're getting bogged down in Brexit.
Any politician has to do.
It's exactly that. Listen, let's not talk about me and let's not talk about Brexit. What does he stand for?
As I told you, I think he stands for the UK, and particularly for UK working class people.
Okay.
And that is what he stands for.
Okay.
Why has
he offered a tax cut?
I know you don't believe it.
Why has he offered a tax cut to people earning over £50,000 a year? And
what's that got to do with him standing up for working class people?
Well, I don't think most people's definition of working class involves earning double the national average salary.
But you see, that is what you are thinking. A lot of people.
But what do you mean by working class then?
Well, we are talking about people who are on the low end of the ladder, whose jobs are
well,
really
exactly.
low
So
jobs.
he's offered tax cuts to people earning more than double the national average salary.
Well, yes, but the thing about
What's he offered to people earning the national average salary, or what's he offered to people at the bottom of the ladder you just described?
How you expect him to answer all that on his first day in office?
I'm not. I'm asking you to. I'm asking you to
just-
answer questions about stuff you just said.
Well, I think he stands for them because he is promising them what they voted for.
Who?
And that's the one thing. He's promising them what they voted for.
He's promising
He's
who
not
what they
behaving
voted
like
for?
The other politicians and the ex-leader of the Tory party that was going to do their own business, whether the Leave voters wanted it or not.
Okay. I hope you're right. I don't really understand what you said, but it sounds a bit more optimistic than a lot of other people are feeling. I don't quite get how tax cuts for people earning over 50 grand a year is evidence of sticking up for the working class, but I suppose, hey, one day maybe everyone will be earning over £50,000 a year, and then that will be a tax cut for the working class. There you go. We could get there. We can do this. Oh boy. And I think I might have stumbled across something, and it feeds into that footballification theory. I almost wish I had a minor speech impediment when I say footballification theory, because footballification theory sounds so much sweeter. My theory of footballification. Because it started happening yesterday, and it was quite odd. I noticed a couple of things, and I know it's probably a little bit silly to take the sillier end, the shallower end of social media as emblematic of any broader truths. But if we've learned anything in the last few years, it's that you do find some harbingers of what is to come in the darkest corners of social media. And look at Trump again. Forgive me for returning to that, but by not paying attention to things like some of these far right websites that he loved and some of these lying conspiracists that he championed. We got taken by surprise. We got mugged. We got hijacked. We thought reality was a bulwark against lies. It turns out that there is a significant appetite for lies in certain socio-economic circumstances. So I was struck yesterday as we were discussing Boris Johnson's imminent elevation, by a significant handful of texts and tweets dropping in the studio saying things like, ha, suck it up. And I get that. I think I get that. I don't quite know what people are celebrating. And I've got a feeling, I just got one now saying, well, at least your beloved Jeremy Corbyn won't be Prime Minister now. And you sit there and you think, I'm sorry I'm using myself as a lens to do this, but we'll get back to the switchboard imminently. You can't have listened to more than 8 nanoseconds of this programme without realising that I consider Jeremy Corbyn to be very, 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 very far from a good leader of the Labour Party. I should be as diplomatic as I can. And that fascinates me. So because I am a critic of Boris Johnson, I must love Jeremy Corbyn. And then I have to do some of this out loud because it's probably going to be the subject of my next book. And then Steve, the caller a month or two ago, explaining that he doesn't mind at all being lied to by Donald Trump because it upsets people like me. And then Terry, a moment ago, portraying Boris Johnson as a champion of the working classes who annoys people like me. And I don't know what that means anymore. Genuinely, I don't think I know who I am in the context of these phrases, people like me. People like me voted for Boris Johnson and then regretted it or repented. But what is this thing that somehow delivers such a wonderful rush of endorphin, such a dopamine hit to the brain, that it allows you to cheer for people who are lying to you? That's the fascinating thing here. So there was, I mean, look, I'm a journalist, and the one area where I kind of nod along with the people who say chaos is good for business is in the context of politicians with big personalities. I love talking about this stuff. I've talked about Boris Johnson more than any other politician, but I don't think we've made much headway together. I provide you with the litany of lies that he's told and transgressions that he's undertaken and conservative values that he's ridden roughshod over. And then people who see themselves as right-wing respond to that by going, ha, yeah, it's great. I said, but it's small r, small c values that I'm talking about. What do you actually believe in? What do you actually believe in as a Boris Johnson fan? See, Terry, a moment ago, believes in defending and sticking up for the poorest people in the country. And somehow Boris Johnson has persuaded her that he does too. Even after the only major policy announcement he made during the campaign was a tax cut for people earning just around double the national average income. I mean, that's an astonishing gift. Not for the first time. What if he used his powers for good? But if your powers are rhetoric and sleight of hand, can you use them for good? You know? Can politicians who use economic hardship to scaremonger or who use immigration to scapegoat, do they have any powers for good? 0345 606 0973. And you, as a Boris Johnson admirer, what do you believe in? Because this is my Brexit theory, is I could speak to two Boris Johnson admirers, and they're going to see him as the man to deliver two very different and incompatible things, which I think, I mean, it's almost like this is scripted. You then turn to his first major backroom appointment, and it's this man, Dominic Cummings, who presided over the law-breaking vote leave and who has described the ERG as something that should be treated like a metastasizing tumour. I've got a massive block on this word. Is there another word for metastasizing? I'm just going to do it like this is how I do it when I have a problem with a word, all right? Ready? Metastasizing. Keith, can you put a bit of bossa nova beat under this? Metastasizing. Right, there. It should now be hardwired into my brain. You should be treated like a metastasizing tumour and excised from the UK body politic. So Johnson's going to keep the ERG suite, and he's going to keep a man who thinks they should be treated like a metastasizing tumour and excised from the UK body politic in the desk next to him at Downing Street. I don't know anymore. Is this an amazing strength? Or, as with Brexit, just a postponement of reality? Paul's in Hornchurch. Paul, what would you like to say?
What does Boris Johnson stand for?
Yes.
I think Boris Johnson stands for Boris Johnson, and really only Boris Johnson.
You're not going to win any prizes for that, obviously.
I know, but if you look at his history, James,
yes.
First-time caller, history of Boris Johnson,
Very well.
Ignoring the vanity projects of things like the water cannons, the Garden Bridge, and he wants to put his name to the London Santander bikes, Boris bikes and all that. You've got to look at the history of this. Okay, the Olympic Park, the stadium, how much did that cost us to convert that into a football stadium for West Ham? Cost us, the taxpayers.
It was an astonishingly bad bit of business, and yet still they queue up to tell us that he somehow delivered the Olympics.
And this is what I'm thinking, Olympic Park slide, the longest slide in the world, probably the most expensive, the world's most expensive cable car rides. There's a list of going on. Heathrow Runway 3, voting for government austerity. What do I think Boris Johnson stands for? Anything that Boris Johnson says to that audience at that particular time and point.
So when does he get found out then?
I don't think he's actually going to do. I don't think he's going to deliver Brexit or deliver a good Brexit in any way. But what will happen?
He doesn't have to deliver a good Brexit, I don't think, because people are now pretending they wanted a bad one.
Brexit or no Brexit or no deal. We crash out. But Boris will sell it. Boris will get both sides on side, and in years to come, people look at it and go, God, that cost us an absolute fortune to get that over the line. But Boris did it for us the same way they do about him being London Mayor.
So you think the Olympic Stadium is the example to which the Olympic Stadium and the non-existent bridge are the examples to which we should look for a guide to how Boris Johnson's premiership will unfold?
Yes, especially when they're using those examples as his premiership and how he's actually delivered for London. He's now got a much bigger budget. The unfortunate side of this is he's got a much bigger budget, which means the debts he leaves behind or the costs he leaves behind for the country are that much larger.
I'm not being glib. I mean, I appreciate it's quite a big mountain for people to climb to think I am genuinely being sincere. But can we not come up with something a little bit more positive? I mean, is there no way we can construe some of what you've just described as these words charisma and optimism? They're not bad things to possess.
Oh, no, definitely not. I mean, you said it earlier. One of your listeners. He would be a great guy to go down a pub with. He actually would be a fantastic guy.
Doesn't buy rounds, apparently. But you've forgiven them.
There's a lot of those guys around. There's a lot of those people, actually. Unfortunately. But he's got that charisma. He's got that jokey, blokey type of charisma that people seem to enjoy being around him on both sides, left or right.
But it doesn't last. I mean, that was the interesting thing about the campaign, is that the people who've worked closest with him outside politics and inside politics, I think their hands are tied by thoughts of ambition, aren't they? But outside politics, people were queuing up to condemn him in the roundest terms. So he might be fun to go for a pint with, but in the words of Amber Rudd, you You wouldn't necessarily want him to drive you home at the end of the evening.
No, totally agree with that. Amber Rudd is absolutely 100% correct on that.
Except she's on side now.
But that's exactly it. I know it's all about feel and belief and everything else. We all hate those terms, especially around Brexit. But I think with Boris Johnson, I just think he's not going to deliver anything that he says he's actually going to deliver. Somebody else will actually pay the price for that. It will be us in our taxes across the country instead of just London nowadays, or previously.
Yeah,
I think he'll get away with it because people will look back and go, but what a guy he was. Look at the charisma. Look at the way he
or even more worryingly, people will say, well, it's all right. I'm actually worse off. But look at those preening liberal dilettantes over there. They're really cross about this. Ha-ha, Boris is on my side. And you say, well, mate, you're poorer. You can't exercise freedom of movement anymore. You've got a pay freeze if you're lucky. You've lost your job if you're not lucky. The economy's on the slide. Things aren't really going great for you. Yeah, but people like you are really cross, so I love him. That's what genuinely now is worrying me the most, because I think that's what's happened in America, and I can't quite see what else can keep him in power here. Where I just got this is from Joe, and I just want to know what you think about this. These people hate other people so much that they are willing to overlook how badly a Johnson or a Trump will affect them personally. Because I presume the subtext to that is because they believe that he's going to hurt the people you hate even more. And then you come back to what's so fascinating about Boris Johnson, and in many ways Brexit, which is that middle class, liberal, metropolitan elite Ramonas are better insulated from the potential problems with Brexit and Boris Johnson than the people who cheer for them both. I think that's a matter of fact. The government's own impact assessment show London as suffering the least from any form of Brexit, whether with or without a deal. All of the impact assessments show diminishment and decline and damage, all of them, every single one, commissioned by our actual government. But I think, and I'm doing this from memory, but quite a recent memory, I was looking at it last night, I think London is best insulated. London suffers the least. London has become a byword for liberal metropolitan elites, whatever that is supposed to mean. But here is the fascinating thing about what Boris Johnson represents. And maybe it's a little bit naive of me to suggest we could have the conversation without mentioning Brexit. But this suggestion from Joe, I'm going to write this down. These people hate other people so much. And it pains me to say this as someone who wants to be an instrument of harmony and love. But all of these phrases, the people like you that we hear on the show quite a lot and see on our inboxes even more, people like you. I don't know what you mean, really. I pushed one caller on it a couple of months ago, and people like me and Sadiq Khan don't like Donald Trump, therefore I like it when he lies. I said, well, I don't like him because he locks children up in cages and he grabs women by their genitals without permission, and he, presides over really horrible ideas and policies and what he... But you don't like any of that. I also think he's racist. And Steve said, well, I'm married to an Indian woman. And I'm like, well, if he was racist to your wife, whose side would you be on then? Mine or his? People like me who say it's awful that you're being racist to Steve's Indian wife. Or people that say, why doesn't she go back where she came from, which is what Donald Trump represents. That's the bit I don't get. So these people hate other people so much that they are willing to overlook how badly Johnson / Trump will affect them personally. Is that true? 0345 6060. Yeah, it is, isn't it? 973, sorry, I forgot to finish off the number there. I'm just trying to think out loud on that. What else is there? What else is there? And that's what he is so fascinating for, because he won the votes of the people like me. He won London twice. It was very, very close, and yeah, I know it's a little bit sweeping. I'm Incorrigible points out 2008 people had just got a little bit bored with Ken Livingstone. I was certainly guilty of that. And then the second time he ran, he retained power on the back of Olympic euphoria. I think that's fair to say as well. But that's what's so fascinating about Boris Johnson. I voted for him because he really annoys people like me, but people like me voted for him because they liked him as well in 2008 and 2012 in the capital city. There's something here. I'm not getting to it yet. I need your help. There's something here. I can feel it. Do you know what I mean? It's like I can just see it. It's like last night, one of my daughter's earring backer fell between the floorboards. I was trying to get it out with 2 safety pins. And that's how I feel at the moment. I just got a little... and it's gone again. And then I pushed it under and had to get a paperclip and bend it and scrape it out and try and pull the... And it's, oh, man alive, there's a lot of detritus down between your floorboards. Oh, why didn't we get a carpet? It'd be much easier. You never would have lost the back. No, you're getting distracted. Get your safety pins out again and unbend that. But do you know what I mean? There's something there. But if Joe's nailed it with that, God knows what happens next. Is it simply the case that Johnson and Trump fans, in the current context, and the link between them, of course, being Farage, it becomes plausible that hate is all there is there. They hate other people so much that they're willing to overlook how badly Johnson and Trump will affect them personally. And then maybe, but Terry didn't sound like she hated people. She sounded a bit, with respect, she sounded a bit silly when she suggested that Boris Johnson is a champion of the working classes. There's no evidence for that, but I suppose if we admire him for his optimism, then you can't criticise other people for being optimistic about him. So what does he stand for? 0345 606 0973. And if you like him, can you tell me what you stand for without using the phrase people like you? Because so far no one's managed. And that's a little bit scary. What do you like about him apart from your perception of the people that don't like him? 0345 606 0973. And stop sending pictures of me in Photoshop Jeremy Corbyn hats. Mick's in Guildford. Mick, what would you like to say?
I think Boris, I'm not a particular fan of his, but I think what he's got is he's always wanted to be Prime Minister. It's his goal in life. And he also wants to go down in history as one of the greatest. So I think that's what pushes him, and I think that's why he will push Brexit through, because he's got that goal. That's his, that's his lifetime.
If he pushes through a no-deal Brexit, he'll go down in history as the Prime Minister who did the most damage to this country.
He'll still go down in history.
Well, Neville Chamberlain went down in history,
yeah. Yeah, but I think it's, but I think he's got more...
So what I'm hearing is...
Because he's got the cabinet, and now all looking towards their jobs and their...
Yeah, you're describing his overweening ambition and vanity as a positive.
Well, it is for him. It's not a positive as a character, but for the post he's going for, he's probably studied prime ministers in the past, like Winston and that. He's interested in that. So
do you know what he said about Winston Churchill? There's a line in his Winston Churchill book that I think sums him up and is the reason why I can't really share your admiration for these qualities. He talks about Winston Churchill watching the rise of Nazism in Germany and deciding to bet against it, as if it was a self-interested decision made entirely on the grounds of his own ambition. So it fits your analysis, this. I don't think it fits Winston Churchill. I think Winston Churchill saw the threat that Hitler posed.
I don't mean with Winston Churchill. I mean, he's just looked at primes. I think he's, studied the idea of being Prime Minister, looked at different Prime Ministers, and he's got and I think that'll help him govern, because that's what makes him a statesman and makes him what he is, because he's...
And how did that come out when he was mad, do you think?
I can't really remember when he was there much, really, to be honest. It was... but I think, you've got to take it into context of all politicians are pretty rubbish anyway and fail anyway, so...
Yeah, but in terms of in terms of your, he studied this and he studied that and he'll do this. What would you point to as I wouldn't ask you if you weren't in the southeast, because you wouldn't need to know to say that if you lived in Newcastle. But you're in Guildford, so when you look back on his
when he was there, I was a lot younger, not interested in politics.
Right.
So, I mean, it's different times, different lives. You take interest in different things, but
it's only 3 years ago.
Yeah. Tax cuts and
4
stuff like
years
that.
ago.
He's doing for the rich. He's probably, he's trying to get onside some of the people who are less inclined for Brexit.
No, that's you're joking on. You Conservative Party members. Again, that myth that Brexit is somehow the will of the workers as opposed to the will of the retired southeast-based baby boomers, or a little bit of both. But the numbers don't support the idea. What are we looking for? We're looking for a positive. So something that is substantive, measurable, something you could sink your teeth into, something that doesn't sound like hope, optimism, charisma. You can't bottle hope, optimism or charisma. If you could, I would vote for Boris Johnson. If you could bottle it and sell it, I would vote for him. But you can't. So what's he actually got on his CV or in his, what you consider his worldview or his ideology to be, that informs your optimism about his premiership? Reasons to be cheerful. 0345 6060 973. Paul's in Sandbach. Paul, what would you like to say?
I just think that Boris will get the job done, and I don't think the EU would ever give us a good deal, because if they gave us a good deal, then Spain and Italy and Greece would want a good deal, and they'd want to leave.
Have you been on a loop since 2015?
Pardon?
Have you been on a loop since 2015? I mean, we're looking for something specific. Boris will do this, Boris will do that, the EU this, the EU that.
Boris is a realist, that he realises that unless you crash out of the EU and a short-term pain, you won't get the long-term gain, because the EU will not give in.
Right.
And therefore...
So why is he why do you think he wrote a column in favour of remaining in the European Union the day before he came out?
Well, there are pros and cons to both, aren't there? But at the end of the day, it's the democratic decision of this country with a majority, and all these politicians
we've just established.
Nobody questions why they're in Parliament, because they won their local election.
Pardon? I'll come back, Paul. Paul?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good man. This is my problem, and I do want to give you some space to explain it. When you talk about the democratic will of 17.4 million people, or whatever phrase you employed to express that thought, and I point out to you that Dominic Cummings, the head of the Law-Breaking Vote Leave, or the brains behind the Law-Breaking Vote Leave, says this to the European Research Group, and I just use this as an example of who you lump together in that 17.4 million. You should be treated like a metastasising tumour and excised from the UK body politic. How do you still hold to the notion that all of those people want the same thing?
There was a vote. It was open to everybody in this country.
I'm with specific reference to the man who masterminded the Law-Breaking Vote Leave campaign, describing the European Research Group, who torpedoed Brexit as being like a metastasising tumour and excise from the UK body politic. With reference only to what's in front of us today, how can you describe them as being a homogenous, cohesive constituency?
I don't use big words like that.
All right, how can you say they're all on the same side?
They had a vote. Everybody had a vote. Everybody was entitled to a vote.
Yes, but they clearly didn't vote for the same thing, Paul, because one of them is a tumour and the other is an advisor to Boris Johnson. So they clearly don't agree on what they voted for.
But everybody in the country has a different opinion, and everybody has the right to exercise that opinion at a poll, at a balloting box.
Yes, but you're claiming that 17.4 million people had the same opinion, and within 30 seconds you're saying that they all have different opinions.
They all have a different approach.
So who does Boris Johnson represent then? Does he represent the metastasising tumour, or does he represent the man that ran the Law-Breaking Vote Leave campaign?
You'd have to ask Boris, wouldn't you?
No, I'm asking you because you rang in to tell me what he represents.
No, I rang in to say he'll be good for this country because.
But that doesn't mean anything, does it? But those are completely empty sound bites. He'll be good for this country. He'll get the job done. What job? The job of Brexit. What Brexit? The Brexit that will please the tumour, or the Brexit that will please the man that ran the Law-Breaking Vote Leave campaign?
It doesn't matter.
Of course it matters. Of course it matters.
The majority.
No, but we've just said that there is no such thing as a majority if you can split it in half immediately. So who do you think, and I'm not going to hold you to this, I'm not going to ring you back in 6 months and go, ha-ha, you were wrong. Who do you think Boris Johnson represents? The man who ran the Law-Breaking Vote Leave campaign, or the men and women he has described himself as being like a metastasising tumour that needs to be excised from the UK body politic? Because there's no way he can represent both of them, is there?
No.
So which one do you think he represents? The metastasising tumour, or the man that ran the Law-Breaking Vote Leave campaign?
I don't think he represents either. I think he represents the working person, me, who voted to leave, and I think he'll get that job done. Whether he'll stay on, whether it'll go further for him, whether we'll come out.
Do you earn more than 50? Do you earn
more
than 50 grand a year? If you don't mind me asking, you don't have to answer that.
Pardon?
Do you earn more than 50 grand a year? You don't have to answer that.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So it's tax cuts for you then?
It's not tax cuts. It's nothing to do with tax cuts.
A normal, ordinary working person on more than double the national average salary.
I've worked.
I know you have, mate.
Wage.
So have plenty of people still are. He's not doing a lot for them. I've got no beef with you, but I'm just intrigued by what people mean when they say ordinary working person. I don't know what I mean when I say it, but I lean towards the national average income. And for the record, I think I'll be in line for even bigger tax cuts. Happy days. If you don't care about the people who are going to be worse off. It's almost enviable. He's got a can-do attitude. He'll get the job done. Which job? Brexit. Why do you want it? Because we voted for it. But why do you want it, though? Because we voted for it. But what will get better? We voted for it. And even I'm getting bored of pointing this out day after day after day after day. You're supposed to be able to tell us now what's going to get better. Boris Johnson, I think is going to be held hostage to fortune. But he is like a political Houdini. And he's going to preside over a government that breaks all of the rules of political tradition. For example, I think, are going to end up with a Home Secretary who got fired effectively by the last Conservative British Prime Minister for lying about her attempts with a lobbyist to open up secret back channels to a foreign government. I'm going to say that again because someone has to. I think we're going to end up with a Home Secretary, in the case of Priti Patel, who got fired by the last Prime Minister. She was compelled to resign, to be technically accurate, after, with a lobbyist, opening up secret back channels to a foreign government and lying about it. That's Home Secretary. We've already got Liam Fox in the Department of International Trade, who left government in disgrace previously. You've got Matt Hancock yesterday reportedly tearing up his own green paper, or wanting to tear up his own green paper that the current Prime Minister likes because he doesn't think the next one will. It's quite incredible. It really is. 23 minutes after 11 is the time. And it's a sort of odd question because apart from saying I like him, nobody can really tell me why. Can-do attitude, he'll get things done. Show me some evidence from the past that demonstrates that. There isn't any. And it doesn't seem to bother people. And then you come back to that suggestion that it's not about what you like anymore. Politics is not about what you want and what you like. It's about hurting people that you think you don't like. And why do you think you don't like them? Because you've been told they're your enemy. But they're not. It just seems to be an environment in which a certain type of politics thrives. And it's the politics of opposition built on nothing, built on sand, you know? You see Donald Trump doing it, and I don't think... Here you go, here's it, Steve, perfect. As long as you lefties get wound up about Brexit, that will do me, says Steve. And yet, Steve, it's almost certain, under the government's own analysis, that Brexit will hit you harder than me. Why does that delight you? I'm not going to stop asking this question. I really want to know. Is it because, use that dreadful phrase, people like me, is it because you look at people like me and you think that we've won the lottery of life? We haven't, by the way. But I can understand that. And you think, they're lucky, they're happy, they're secure, or whatever it is you think we are. And then Brexit has annoyed us and upset us, and you love that because you spend your life being annoyed and upset? I don't know, mate. I'm just reading out your capitalised text and taking it in good faith. Why would that make you happy? Why? Because you say lefties, and then you look for a very rough definition of what lefty means, particularly if you are lucky enough to have a few quid in your pocket. Then a lefty is, as you know, a champagne socialist. A lefty is someone who thinks that perhaps the system needs to be slightly rejigged to make people like me less lucky. So that, for example, Steve, your children should have as much chance of the glittering prizes as Jacob Rees-Mogg's children. That's why I'm a lefty, because I think your kids deserve a crack at the highest echelons of British life or deserve a crack at success and wealth or whatever you want to call it. I think they deserve an equal crack to Jacob Rees-Mogg's children or Boris Johnson's children. I don't think we'll get that in my lifetime, but I think we could make the gap a little bit smaller, Steve. That's why I'm a lefty, so to speak, although by Jeremy Corbyn's standards, I'm practically a fascist, according to many of his fans. So what is it, mate? What is it you get out of this? I think Brexit's going to be really bad for poor people. Really bad. Especially in the northeast and the southwest. And that makes you happy. Give us a call, Steve-O. Come on, mate. 0345 60 973. I don't want to over-speculate, but I suspect that any available analysis of Brexit is going to hit you harder than it hits me. My upset that you celebrate is built upon what I think is going to happen to you and your children. My politics is built upon a profound belief, linked to my Christian faith, that your children have at least as much right to the glittering prizes that life in Britain has to offer as my children do, or as Jacob Rees-Mogg's children do. But at the moment, they don't. My children are in front of your children in the queue because of my financial situation. Jacob Rees-Mogg's children are in front of all of those because of his financial situation. And when I suggest that Brexit's going to make everything worse, especially for people behind me in the queue, you say good, even though you're probably one of them. 0345 60 973 is the number you need. So, reasons to be cheerful on the one hand, but I do, and this is my new mission, I really want to get inside that mindset. And I know that over the last few years I haven't done a great deal necessarily to make this feel like a safe space for you. But if you really do recognise yourself in what I'm describing, saying, actually, I don't know why I like Boris Johnson, but I love the fact that he winds James up. Just give me a call and tell me where the payout is on that. When does the machine pay out on that? Because if I'm right and your life gets worse, who are you going to get cross with then? Yourself? The people that told you your life was going to get better? Or the people who told you that it wasn't? I honestly don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that once you start lying to yourself, all bets are off. Anything is possible. And Boris Johnson seems, and I still can't go all the way towards the Trump parallels, he's certainly taken heed from the Steve Bannon playbook. We know they've met up, and we know that there are, back channels operating there. But I don't think he would start encouraging people to chant "Send her home." I don't think he'd separate children from their parents and lock them in cages. I just don't. And until he does, I won't believe that it's possible. But this mindset, which explains Brexit and explains Boris Johnson, he winds up people like you. But people like me think that you're going to get hurt more than I am by this. How can that reach your ears as good news? What is it I'm missing? 0345 60 973 is the number that you need. What's the payout? What does it look like? When the machine starts spewing coins into the tray at the bottom of the spinning wheels, what does that actually look like? Because I can't see it from here. I can see you sitting in the corner of the pub watching other people pour their money into the machine and not getting anything out. Ha, 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 mugs. But then there's the person sitting over there saying, mate, don't put your money in that machine. Seriously, the bank will always win. Don't put your money in that Boris machine. Don't put your money in that Brexit machine. And then you put all your money in it, and you're skint, and on the way out of the pub you turn to me and you go, ha ha, I'm skint now. I love the fact you're so uncomfortable with me playing that fruit machine and losing. Ha ha, that'll teach you. So what's the payout? 11:30 is the time. The British are among the worst idlers in the world. We work among the lowest hours, we retire early, and our productivity is poor. Do you want the good news or the bad news? I shall tell you shortly. Before that, Gus O'Donnell was, of course, a cabinet secretary under 3 successive prime ministers between 2005 and 2011, the highest official in the British service, British civil service. He is now, of course, ennobled, Lord O'Donnell, and he joins me on the line now. Lord O'Donnell, I think we're looking for detail today on what happens when Boris Johnson returns from the palace. What sort of to-do list will be placed before him?
Well, he'll come back on the steps of Downing Street and give us, we hope, some words of wisdom. I mean, quite often Prime Ministers have laid out their vision for how they see the country. So there's a chance he may do that in a way that I think he didn't really do in his speech yesterday. That will be quite good, and might talk about having been elected by the few, he's going to govern for the many and bring the country together. Then he'll go into Downing Street, be clapped in by the staff who just an hour ago previously clapped out Theresa May. And then it gets down to serious business, and he's, the Cabinet Secretary will be talking to him. They've already had conversations about things like what's the plan on Brexit. That's really important as the first step because everything folds around that. So in the light of your plan, how is that fitting with your cabinet appointments, which you're about to do? Because he's got to sort that out. What's his approach going to be? Is it going to be bringing the different factions together within cabinet? Like Theresa May, she gave a lot of the key Brexit jobs to hardline Brexiteers. That didn't work. He needs to find a way through, and he needs to know when he has all those calls with the heads of government, particularly European heads of government, what's the message he wants to give them on Brexit?
It's all about Brexit, then, whatever he may say about other policy areas.
Well, I think he'll try very hard to say it's not all about Brexit, and he'll want a big domestic agenda, and he'll announce all sorts of things. The reality is, with virtually no majority in the House of Commons, it's incredibly hard for him to get anything through on that. So it'll be nice to know what a Boris prime ministership would mean. Is it the Boris who is mayor of London, who is very pro-immigration, who's very liberal in his views? Or is it the Boris we've seen in the last few weeks, which, to be honest, comes up with some things which are, how shall I put it, slightly unusual for a Conservative Prime Minister in the sense that seems to be spending an enormous amount of money.
Yes, I'm glad you've picked up on that dichotomy between Boris Johnson, London Mayor, and Boris Johnson, Prime Minister. I thought I was going mad, but they are two almost irreconcilable political figures.
And we will not know which one we've got inside 10 Downing Street until we start to get some of the plans coming through about what precisely does he want to do on Brexit.
Will that be days or weeks? I mean, bearing in mind that the other side are mostly on holiday.
Yes, no, the French will have done what the French always do in August, which is disappear off, have a great time, and think it's our problem, not theirs. I will be saying, use this to the new Prime Minister, use this time, go and visit the Taoiseach in Ireland, go and talk about various ways through that work for everybody. Try and find what wiggle room there is on the political declaration.
But I notice you don't say the withdrawal agreement. A lot of his cheerleaders are still arguing on this programme yesterday, trying to argue that the withdrawal agreement would be reopened, despite, of course, the repeated insistence from the continent that it won't be, and from Ireland that it won't be.
Yes, exactly. He may try, but, who do we believe on that? I think the EU's got a very clear position. They've kept all 27 countries very firmly there. I think it's hard to see how you get anything other than cosmetic changes to these things. But we shouldn't underestimate cosmetic changes, because I think Boris has the ability. I think one of the areas where he may outperform the previous Prime Minister is in his ability to sell.
Are you suggesting he can sell a sow's ear as a silk purse, Gus O'Donnell?
Certainly not. I'm just saying that, a few tweaks and it can be Boris's New Deal. It may not be that new when you look at it closely, but it might be just enough for a Conservative Party that have now, they've done all the things they can. They've changed Prime Minister. What more can they do? And you had people like Jacob Rees-Mogg voting for the previous deal. So just maybe he can get enough of them across the line, because my own view is that if they have a general election pre-Brexit, then I mean, it'll be a disaster for them because the Brexit Party will take an enormous number of votes from them.
And a third referendum? What are the prospects of that?
Well, I think that's an area where if we move towards if Boris is serious, if his plan is to really change the withdrawal agreement, if that's the plan and that fails, then he might well move to the crashing out with no deal, in which case there might then be moves by Parliament and others to think about, can we, rather than that, move to a second referendum?
And finally, Gus O'Donnell, you were in post, of course, when Gordon Brown assumed the reins of power from Tony Blair without going to the country. That doesn't make any difference to the authority of a Prime Minister.
No, I've done it twice now. It's Gordon Brown from Tony Blair and John Major from Margaret Thatcher. No, I think it's certainly something that's there for Prime Ministers. I mean, they would all like to get their mandate. Of course, the point is they don't want to do, in a sense, what Theresa May did, which was have a second election and end up in a worse position than you were before. So they would both like to, I think Boris would like to have that general election to get his own mandate, but he wants to do it to ensure that he ends up in a position where he can carry out his domestic agenda and have a clear majority in Parliament. And it's not clear to me yet. I think he can only do that once he's delivered something on Brexit.
So, I mean, all eyes on October the 31st then?
Indeed. Which may get delayed, but we'll see.
Gus O'Donnell, many thanks indeed.
You're welcome.
Lord O'Donnell, I should say. 11:41 is the time. 03456060973 is the number. Just bear this in mind, because I don't know, you're going to have to give me a bit of guidance on this, because it is, I can tell it's becoming my genuine fascination now, is this people like you line. So people like me believe that Brexit is going to hit the regions and the lower paid people much harder than anyone else. And then I get a queue of people from the regions in the category of lower paid people queuing up to say, good, ha-ha, it upsets people like you. Why will you losing your job make you happy because I will feel sorry for you? Do you see what I mean about there being a question at the heart of this weird psychological condition somewhere? I'll tell you what Anira Bevan said, and this, in many ways, is a question I would love to do as a phone-in. I don't know whether we can yet. Even by my standards, it might be a tiny bit pretentious. But this is what Anira Bevan said about 20th century politics, actually. How can wealth persuade poverty to use its political power to keep wealth in power? Here lies the whole art of conservative politics in the 20th century. And that cuts to the absolute heart of everything we've been discussing in recent months, even years. People queuing up to say, ha-ha, yay, I'm with Jacob, I'm with Boris, I'm with Trump. And people like me, use that dreadful phrase, saying, but they're going to make you poorer. They're going to remove some of your freedoms. They're going to remove some of the rights and protections that you currently enjoy in law. They want a bonfire of regulations. They told you this. Regulations protect workers from potentially exploitative employers. Regulations protect tenants and homeowners from flammable cladding, for example, or at least they're supposed to. That line there, why do you, as someone who's not wealth, cheer efforts to keep wealth in power? And if I find a pithier way of asking that question, I think we'll do it at 12 o'clock every Friday until they carry me out of here in a lace-up jacket. Linton's in Archway. Linton, I'm not doing very well on my list of positives, and I'm not being facetious or glib for once. I would like to feel a little bit of the warm glow of optimism, but optimism won't pay the bills. What will? What can we put down as reasons to be cheerful about a Boris Johnson premiership?
I'm not going to give you any positives.
Oh, Linton!
Because, sorry about that, but in the way I look at it, Boris Johnson was elected by the Tory party.
Yes.
He wasn't elected by general election. So he finds himself in power. But the Tory party wants to remain in power. And there's no other person in their arsenal that's up to the job. They look at him and think, he's, popular and charismatic, all that. All the stuff he's done in the past, and don't worry about that. That's just the way things are. There's no statesman. Jeremy Corbyn's under fire left, right, and centre because of anti-Semitism. There's no statesman in the Labour Party. So there's no one anyone could put forward.
You're right. It's an astonishingly
it's just
slim
pickings. It's just a bland output when you look.
I don't know if I'd agree with it being bland. I think it's toxic, which is generally the opposite of bland. But there's no.
But you get my point.
I do get your point.
There's no one who can stand up and say, right, yeah, this is what we're going to go and do. And I'll tell you what, people are just bored of Brexit. Everyone with a brain knows that Brexit's going to ruin this country.
No, but that's, you see, I
tell you what.
Go on.
The people who think that it's going to be better for this country are frankly stupid. That's the bottom line, in my opinion.
Yeah, but that doesn't win them over. That doesn't win them over, does it?
I think most Tory politicians believe it's the stupid thing. And I tell you what, for saying we're going to follow the will of the people when it was a 52-48 vote, and we were sold it on a lie, and I tell you what, you've got to follow through by upholding the will of the people.
But the 52% of people don't agree with each other. Well, I know, but this doesn't. Listen, I wrote the book on this almost literally, and it doesn't win people over to call them stupid. So what do you do instead? Do you read them stuff like this, Linton? Do you think this works, okay? The British are among the worst idlers in the world. We work among the lowest hours, we retire early, and our productivity is poor, whereas Indian children aspire to be doctors or businessmen. The British are more interested in football and pop music. Now, if Emily Thornberry said that, and it ended up on the front page of The Sun with a picture of a transit van with a flag of St. George dangling out the back window, she'd be public enemy number one for the next 6 months. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, this was in a book.
I can't disagree.
This was in a book written by Kwasi Kwarteng, Priti Patel, Dominic Raab, Chris Skidmore and Liz Truss, at least three of whom are tipped to be in Boris Johnson's cabinet. They have described British workers as being more interested in football and pop music. Now, I think the people that like Boris Johnson and or Donald Trump, I think they hear that and think, oh yeah, but they're not talking about me. They're talking about my neighbours or my wife's cousin. They're talking about those chiselers that are swinging the lead. And yet they're not. They are talking about you. It's your protections that are going to be taken away. It's your working hours that are going to be increased. It's your retirement age that is going to be postponed. It's your working day that's going to be increased. And yet people don't think that it's them.
Tell you what, all these things are true, but, I was aghast when Donald Trump won presidency. And look where that's led us.
Yeah, but some people are still cheering him because it leaves... You're called Linton, you middle-class cliché. The fact that it leaves you aghast is what delights the people. It doesn't matter that what makes you aghast is the con being visited on these people. Your aghastness, Linton, is what delights them. How do you crack that nut, mate?
I just don't know.
But
I tell you what, you reach a level of apathy, James. You just like that. I could just.
Well, I can't. I do this for a living. I'm not allowed to have apathy. I'd have to start playing records.
You've got to do it for a living. I mean, you're brilliant at it.
See if I can get a gig on Smooth.
I think the majority of people with a brain have just reached a level of apathy with politics in the world.
Apathy or anger.
I can't be bothered.
They're either angry or they're apathetic, and there's nothing in between. And that's what they rely on. That's what they rely on.
I've passed anger.
Yes, I know you have. I know you have, but the other lot haven't. They're queuing up. Everyone's really angry, especially the people who are now getting their own way. We're going to crash out with no deal on October the 31st and Boris Johnson's in Downing Street. Surely now, lads, you should be chilling, having a bit of a celebration. But no, they're getting angrier and angrier and angrier. The people like you question, Steve has attempted to answer it. Maybe a perception of why do middle-class people always think they know what's best for working-class people? It's a feeling of condescension, perhaps. I think you're right, Steve. There clearly is a feeling of condescension. But when I point out that Priti Patel, who's on her way to the Home Office, probably, Dominic Raab, who will probably be in the Cabinet as well, Liz Truss, who is pretty much a shoo-in, Kwasi Kwarteng and Chris Skidmore to make up the numbers, they wrote this book. They literally wrote this book, and it states that the British are among the worst idlers in the world. We work amongst the lowest hours, we retire early, and our productivity is poor. Whereas Indian children aspire to be doctors or businessmen, the British are more interested in football and pop music. These people despise ordinary working voters. And yet we've had two people on the programme today describing themselves as ordinary working voters, and they think that Johnson's their man. All of these people also think that Johnson's their man. Now, they can't both be right. Either he will stick up for people like Terry and low-paid workers, or they'll stick up for the fella talking about workers and in line for a tax cut from Boris Johnson, or he'll delight Kwasi Kwarteng, Priti Patel, Dominic Raab, Chris Skidmore and Liz Truss, who essentially think that the British are among the worst idlers in the world. And they're the ones trying to drape themselves in the flag of patriotism. 10 to 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Selina is in Dagenham. Selina, what have you got? Oh, hang on. Am I late for the break? Crikey, I do apologise. I stand by that. If the Sun got hold of Emily Thornberry saying something, and I think of her because she posted a photograph of a flag of St George dangling out of a window during an election campaign, and it was clearly meant to convey disapproval of the aesthetics, and the Sun, of course, turned it into a disapproval of the United Kingdom or some sort of unpatriotic assault upon ordinary working voters. And yet this line here in this book, and I've mentioned it, I used to mention this book to you quite often, Brittania Unchained, published only 9 years ago, and they'd already taken their seats in Parliament. And the astonishing volume, very slim manifesto for the future of Britain, as envisioned by Kwasi Kwarteng, Priti Patel, Dominic Raab, Chris Skidmore and Liz Truss, at least three of whom I think are going to be in the Cabinet by close of play tomorrow. And they are persuaded that we need to hack back regulations and protections, and we need to focus almost exclusively on the demands of businesses who should not be required to pay as much tax as they currently do, and that, well, the British are among the worst idlers in the world. Now, they're talking about you, okay? They're also talking about me. I clock off at 1 o'clock every day, but more pertinently, in terms of productivity and hours and retirement ages, they're not talking about gobs on sticks. They're talking about ordinary workers, that phrase that is commonplace now, ordinary workers. And these Boris Johnson supporters are saying, we work among the lowest hours, we retire early and our productivity is poor. The British are more interested in football and pop music, whereas Indian children aspire to be doctors and businessmen. So not only are they calling you lazy, they're also saying that you're not as ambitious for your children or as aspirational as the Indian family over the road. It's actually quite incredible. To even start to compete with the rising economies of India, China and Brazil, we need to avenge the dependency culture and stop indulging in irrelevant debates about sharing the pie between manufacturing and services, the North and the South, women and men. The advice was that we double down on austerity and leave everything to good old-fashioned laissez-faire economics. They are now, every single one of them, supporters of Boris Johnson. Now explain that to me. I think Boris Johnson stands for ordinary working voters. 5 people who think that ordinary working voters are the laziest in the world support Boris Johnson. I don't know whether he's on their side or not. I genuinely don't. That's what I find most terrifying about him. You know, I've been studying him in a practical petri dish, best part of a decade. I haven't got a clue what he believes in or stands for. I personally, for the record, don't think he believes in anything at all. I really don't. I think that lazy line, which I criticised someone for earlier, is the nearest to the truth we will get. He just believes in himself. Today, for Boris Johnson, mission is accomplished. Doesn't actually matter to him much what happens next. He'd like to go down in history as a great Prime Minister, but it's more important to him to go down in history as a Prime Minister, even a bad one. Can't take that away from him. Okay? So, if we don't know what he stands for, and people who think that you are among the laziest workers in the world think that he stands for what they stand for, why aren't you a bit more worried? Answer, well, to go back to Anaya and Bevin, how can wealth persuade poverty to use its political power to keep wealth in power? Here lies the whole art of conservative politics in the 20th century. So if you've got a ton of money invested in one of J-Dog's funds, whether it's one of the funds that has moved to Dublin to take advantage of European Union membership or one of the funds that will stay here, if you've got a ton of money, I get it. But we come back again and again and again to this question. And that phrase, people like you, people like me. People like me think that Brexit is going to hurt people not like me more than it hurts us. And the people that we think it's going to hurt are loving our discomfort on their behalf. And I'm not going to let that go. I'm sorry. I will endeavour not to be dull, but I'm not going to let it go. It's the single most important question of our age, I think. Just glancing at the clock, it's 11:58. We're not going to take the news. We will take Theresa May's valedictory, I hope I've used that word correctly. We will take Theresa May's valedictory PMQs live, and that leaves us in that delightfully entertaining territory of having to keep one eye on the screen and the other eye on the microphone. After that, I think Theo Usherwood will join us for a little bit of a roundup of where we are and what is likely to happen next. So midday is the time at which it's due to start. Should we squeeze in a little call? Or should we sit tight and wait until the Speaker introduces the soon-to-be former Prime Minister? I don't know. Let's just squeeze in Selina, who's in Dagenham. Selina, because everyone else is sick of the sound of my voice. Selina, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Just to say that I thought about what you said about the reasons to be cheerful, and I'm not trying to be cheerful. I think I'm convincing myself to be positive because we've had so long with a Tory government, and I agree with you in a sense that I'm quite lefty, and I believe that my children should have equal opportunities available to
that's
them.
not. I mean, I know I've described that as lefty. There's plenty of people in the Conservative. Oh, I did warn you. I'm going to cross live to the House of Commons. Theresa May moves into the longer grass of her valedictory PMQs. We turn our attention away from the House of Commons and towards perhaps what is on the road ahead this afternoon. If any unexpected events occur back in the House, worry not. We will be crossing back there live in the blink of an eye. But Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor, is with me now. We'll take a moment, I think, Theo, just to glance in the rear-view mirror, and then you can remind us what is on the road ahead this afternoon. That was curiously caustic, wasn't it, for a practice that normally sees hatchets, if not being buried, then at least being temporarily sheathed.
There was no love loss between Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn. The only bit came at the end where she told the Labour leader that she recognised that they did have something in common when they in how they treated their constituents and their concerns for their constituents. And she said she was reminded of that when she visited the Finsbury Park Mosque, which is in Jeremy Corbyn's constituency, which was subject to a terrorist attack in 2017. And then she said perhaps that he should copy her lead and recognise that his time is up and leave. You will, of course, remember, James, that David Cameron said exactly the same thing just before he left office and shouted across the dispatch box at Corbyn, "Just go, man." And Jeremy Corbyn now rolls on to Conservative leader number 3.
But, I mean, here is a thing, because you would think that a Conservative leader, albeit an outgoing one, who wants the leader of the opposition to go as well, you would think that was an admission of fear, wouldn't you? You would do, because if you were a Conservative, you wouldn't want to get rid of a Labour leader who you thought was going to lose. You'd only want to get rid of a Labour leader who you thought was going to win. And yet, as with many things, it's possibly not that simple in Jeremy Corbyn's case.
I thought it was the other way round from listening to that comment.
It wasn't simple.
I thought it was the other way round, and I think it was also the same when David Cameron said it.
So you think they wanted Jeremy Corbyn to be replaced with a leader more likely to beat them in a general election?
To pull the pendulum back the other way. That David Cameron went after he lost the referendum, and Theresa May is going, and Boris Johnson is taking over. And there's a recognition, perhaps, that the pendulum has swung so far now towards, in terms of right-wing politics, so far towards away from the centre, that actually if Labour were to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn and provide a more centrist alternative, that would be then it would then be possible to actually force Boris Johnson back into the centre ground, away and towards...
Slightly complicating things, perhaps, but I understand what you're saying. They would almost be seeing Jeremy Corbyn's... They would be seeing, and I'm not expressing an opinion on this myself, they would be seeing Jeremy Corbyn's departure and the replacement by a more moderate Labour leader as being good for the national interest, as opposed to their Conservative Party interest. Yeah, okay.
So the reason that Boris...
He's not exactly Karl Marx, is he, though? He's I mean, in the international context, his politics is actually quite centrist, according to the Scandinavian model.
Jeremy Corbyn's? But not in British politics.
No, which does tack ever further to the right.
So the point I'm making is that Boris Johnson and the movement within the Conservative Party that we've seen in the last and in conservatism more broadly in the last 4 or 5 years, that has happened because there hasn't been a valid, and this would be Theresa May's view, that there hasn't been a valid alternative from the left, and that if Jeremy Corbyn were to go and to be replaced by somebody more centrist, then that would provide a better ballast to Boris Johnson. And that's the point, which I think is, and that I think is the frustration that Theresa May is ultimately, and people will disagree with this on grounds of, say, the Windrush scandal and hostile environment and so forth. I don't dispute it, but Theresa May is ultimately of the establishment. There is a truth to the fact that she campaigned to remain in the European Union, and that she was trying to get a withdrawal agreement through the House of Commons that would actually prevent a no-deal Brexit from happening. And there is a deep sense of, I think, frustration and peril that what is now actually going to happen is we are going to go towards something that is unknown.
And this afternoon we're not. This afternoon we know exactly how things are going to unfold. Just talk us briefly through that.
So Theresa May, after Prime Minister's Questions is finished, will return to number 10 Downing Street. She will have lunch with her staff. She will thank her staff. At about 2:20, she will walk out of number 10 Downing Street and give an address to the nation. There will be the optics of her husband Philip May will be there. Gavin Barwell, her chief of staff, who she paid tribute to. Robbie Gibb, her director of communications. They'll all be lining the street. She'll give that short address. She will then get in her car and be driven to Buckingham Palace, where she will hand in her resignation to the Queen as Prime Minister. She will also recommend to the Queen that Boris Johnson is her successor and should become Prime Minister. At that point, she ceases to become Prime Minister. She's already ceased to become Conservative leader after Boris Johnson won the contest yesterday. She will then depart back to her constituency in Maidenhead, her home in Sonning. Boris Johnson, shortly after, around 3:30, will be driven into Buckingham Palace and to tell the Queen that he can form a government. He will then be driven to Downing Street at about 4 o'clock and make a speech to the nation, which will broadly speaking, it will be less than the one yesterday, which was very much focused on the Conservative Party, and then he will go inside number 10 Downing Street. And one of the first acts he'll have to do is to write 4 separate handwritten letters of last resort for the nuclear submarines before he goes to his Commons office, where he will sack those he doesn't want to keep in post in his parliamentary office, away from the television cameras, and then return to Downing Street to make his key appointments.
So all to play for this afternoon. We shall find out who is going to be rewarded for their loyalty and who is going to be perhaps exiled for their honesty. It's 12:31. Farewell then, Theresa May. I can't imagine you think it's gone well. I wonder just how badly you think your premiership has been. I was just sort of chatting to Theo off-air then about what success would have looked like. I suppose she can console herself with the thought that by the weekend she'll be the second worst Prime Minister in living memory, probably. But what would success have looked like? And Theo made a characteristically astute point. I'm not sure I agree with him, actually, about the Jeremy Corbyn analysis that he just shared. But often when I disagree with Theo, it turns out that he was right and I was wrong. Not always. But on this one, he's bang on the money. The withdrawal agreement, it was all about the withdrawal agreement for her, wasn't it? And this is where I think that the change in personnel actually possibly does herald the chance of a change in direction. Nothing is going to change substantively. I don't think the withdrawal agreement is going to be reopened. But the whole reason for backing Boris Johnson is his ability to persuade people. Now, people on my side of history would argue he's very good at persuading people to act against their own interests, brackets, and in his, close brackets. But you don't need any brackets or subtext. He is very good at persuading people to do stuff. So it seems to me, having spoken to a variety of players over the last 48 hours, that the idea is that Boris Johnson will get through a version of the withdrawal agreement by pretending that it's more different than it really is from Theresa May's. I'm not going to bet against that yet. I'm going to be just as intrigued and fascinated by watching it unfold, but that seems to me to be where we are. The problem with that is, this is very box-fresh analysis, so if I drop any clangers or trip over my own shoelaces, do be gentle with me. The problem with that analysis is, and I'm quite well placed to say this, I think, is that people have moved to the next level of self-delusion and have now persuaded themselves quite seriously that they want to leave without a deal. Johnson's supporters almost all recognise that that would be catastrophic. I think that's the point of Dominic Cummings' blog. Someone else I need to study a little bit more. When Dominic Cummings describes the ERG, when he says you should be treated like a metastasising tumour and excised from the UK body politic. And there's another great line here, bringing to mind very clearly how during the referendum so many of you guys were too busy shooting or skiing or chasing girls to do any actual work. Now, that's fascinating. Cummings, we think, is going to have a big job in Downing Street. That's what he thinks about the ERG. So you have to break it down now into this whole no-deal nonsense is, I think, where everything pivots. Nobody sensible thinks it's a good idea. Some seemingly sensible people thought that we had to make them think we'd do it in order to get them to budge. For my money, that was really stupid, for reasons that we've explained a million times on this programme, but perhaps to no avail. It's not the same as a normal negotiation. You don't walk into a negotiation to buy a new house after having set fire to your old one. You know, if the negotiation to buy a new house doesn't go well, you sleep that night in your old one. You take it off the market, you see. So that, for me, is a really powerful analogy. But that was the big gamble, was somehow almost as if they thought that the European Union countries and governments wouldn't read the British media. Because it was a wink, wasn't it? No deal? I think the people that have said it were winking. We've got to make them think we'd do it. Of course we wouldn't. That would be insane. Look at the impact assessments. But I don't think people heard the second bit. And then you got Farage marching up and down as usual, like a sort of cockerel, pretending that it will be actually desirable or a good idea for Britain in any way, because that's what keeps him relevant, keeps him in the public eye. And that, for me, is the big problem Johnson's got, is that he now has a lot of people cheering him who are kidding themselves that no deal will be anything else. Not just that no deal will not be a disaster, but that they actually want it. That cautiously suggests, I cautiously suggest, that's his first big problem. And I don't know how he'll deal with it, because the coward's way out would be to crash out without a deal, because it allows him to avoid confronting the reality. And everything about Brexit since June 2016 has been about avoiding that reality. Resigning after Chequers was about avoiding that reality. What would continue to evade reality? Crashing out without a deal and pretending it was going to be okay. I don't know. Theresa May? Any calls on that? The idea that Theresa, anything you'd like to say? Could things have gone any worse for her? 0345 606 0973. Let's get back to the phones if anyone's still awake. Rebecca is in High Wycombe. Rebecca, what made you pick up the phone this afternoon?
Cold fury.
Oh.
I'm a volunteer with One Can Trust, which is the food bank in Brexit Hardman Steve Baker's constituency.
Right.
And this morning at the food bank, we've been collecting from about 12 local schools. We've been unloading thousands and thousands of cans. And as I was driving back from the food bank, I heard you talking about Brittania Unchained.
Yes.
And these characters like Rob and Priti Patel who want to reduce public spending even further.
Yes.
And I'm curious. When this lot came into power in 2010, that we had hardly any food banks. Now we've got more than 2,000 food banks in this country. Life expectancy is falling. Infant mortality is rising. And this is what Theresa May has left for us. And against that background, people like our MP, Steve Baker, are talking about reducing public spending further, and people like Rob talking about the British worker being lazy.
Well, Brexit hardman Steve Baker is not part of this authorship. I don't know.
Okay, so maybe... Well, I still think with these problems in the country, messing around with a no-deal Brexit or messing around with Brittania Unchained and laissez-faire...
Just for people who may not be familiar with what has led to your cold fury, I should read out this line in a book co-authored by Kwasi Kwarteng, Priti Patel, Dominic Raab, Chris Skidmore and Liz Truss, at least 3 of whom are expected to have big jobs, possibly cabinet-level jobs. The British are among the worst idlers in the world. We work among the lowest hours, we retire early, and our productivity is poor. Whereas Indian children aspire to be doctors or businessmen, the British are more interested in football and pop music. I don't like the usual tactics of whataboutery, because they're lies normally. They're saying, here, my fella's done something awful. Let's pretend that your fella's done something mildly bad and pretend that they're the same. But if Sadiq Khan or Emily Thornberry or Diane Abbott came out with a line like this, you'd be able to see the fireworks from space.
You would. We had a guy at the food bank. He had to get a collective food parcel a few months ago. So he was somebody who worked 2 jobs. He just about covered his family needs from his 2 jobs. A car drove through a pothole and he messed up one of his tyres, and that was his food budget for the month. And so this was somebody who was working his head off. And we see that at the food bank all the time. These are very often not people who are on benefits. These are people who are working and their incomes are just not enough to cover their basic outlays.
And when he turns his radio on and hears Conservatives crowing about low unemployment rates, he's going to be very, 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 what's the word I'm looking for? Confused, perhaps? Disgusted works, yes.
Yeah, so
But is this the philosophy of Brittania Unchained? You've got a job, be grateful for it, we'll pay you as little as the market allows.
And we'll guarantee you only need 1 hour a week of guaranteed work before you're counted as employed.
And you won't be unemployed for the reasons that you've just explained, and you can rely on charities like food banks and volunteers like you, rather than what the welfare state was designed to do, rather than the actual tax-funded safety net. We'll take the burden of looking after the vulnerable away from taxes and put it instead upon the altruistic and the volunteers, or, in the words of people like some of the politicians that we're both thinking of, mugs like you.
Yeah, and sometimes I do wonder, with everything we're doing with food banks and litter picking and stuff, are we just enabling the government to wash its hands of these things, which in a civilised country the government should just do? A German friend said to me the other day, in Germany we have hardly any charities. In Britain you seem to have so many charities.
I know.
That's because in Germany we organise these things at state level.
I know.
But,
I don't want to open that door, because that is chilling, isn't it? Because we all think we're doing all right, doing something right when we support charities, and then in the back of your mind you have that little whisper saying, the more you do, the less responsibility government will have to do it. And that is playing into the hands of people who don't think that, well, you know, that old line from the American hotelier about taxes are for little people.
Yeah, and then you wake up in the morning and you think, goodness me, I am David Cameron's big society, but this is rubbish. This is no way to run a country. And
what if everyone opts out? What if we don't?
Well,
what if we run out of Rebecca's?
In Wickham, the reason we started this big campaign was 2 years ago, the food bank ran out of food in the summer holidays. Towards the end of the summer holidays, they couldn't give out balanced food parcels anymore because we didn't have enough protein foods. And these are often going to children. So we started the big summer hunger campaign to try and fill the food bank for the children in the summer holidays, because the Parliament and committees have been talking about opening schools during the summer holidays to feed children. But of course, anything positive has just gone down the Brexit black hole.
Of course it has, and any attempt to properly report this will be scuppered at the first term by some tabloid digging up the fact that one of the teachers at one of the schools earns X £100,000 a year, and that means all claims of poverty on the part of the pupils are nonsense. And we edge ever closer to Brittania Unchained, which of course means Brittania utterly unprotected. 12:47 is the time. Rebecca, I'm cracking on only because I'm already late for the break.